Welcome to Financial Tips and Tricks. My name is Kim Bateson. I am with Plumline Consulting, and I usually do a lot of project presentations. They're actually let me do a financial one today, so I'm kind of excited. You guys feel free to ask questions as we go along. I'm not opposed to answering when you have a burning question. So if it's too long to answer, I'll tell you we'll talk later, okay? Today we're going to do, it's kind of a walkthrough of just different things. Anytime you do a tips and tricks, it's just a hodgepodge of things that we're going to discuss. So we're going to focus on the financial modules and a few things on the tools, the system tools as well. Focus on AP, AR, GL. One of the things, if you're using Dynamics SL 2011 and you're using SQL Server authentication, a lot of times users don't know where they can change their own password. So there's two kinds of authentication with Dynamics. You can have Windows authentication, which means when you log onto your machine, it recognizes who you are and it logs you right in. That's one. And so when you change your domain password, that automatically still logs you into Dynamics. If you use SQL authentication, that means they set you up as a specific user and they type in a password for you. So you have the ability, as a SQL user, if we use SQL authentication, to change your own password. And the little icon at the top right-hand corner of the screen is where you see that password change. There's also within those tools, you can change the kind of the way your system looks and feels for you specifically. There's a few things that you can do, such as you can, if you're used to hitting the Enter key, Dynamics by default uses the Tab key to advance from field to field. If you like the Enter key, then you can check this box, and then when you hit the Enter key, the cursor will move for you rather than having to hit the Tab key. Also, you can have grid lines in any entry screen, and those grid lines can be numbered. So if you want numbers going down the left-hand side, just show grid lines and numbers, and those numbers will show. So here's an example without grid lines and numbers. And once I've checked that box, that's where you'll see those numbers. If you use currency, in older versions of SL, we showed the currency flag in the screen. So when you could set up a currency flag in currency maintenance. With the newer versions, we can still show the currency flag. It's just a different way. I don't know if you're familiar with where the currency flag shows up. I'm going to get to a point where there's a screenshot. So basically, you have to there's a KB article, but it shows you just have to create a new folder in your root called currency and put your flag in there. And it can't be bigger than 16 by 16. I'll show you a screenshot. I thought it was going to come up here. So here's what it looks like without the flag. And then if you do all those steps where you add the currency folder, you insert your BMP file, and then making sure the size is appropriate. Then after you've done that, there's the currency. You just put a folder in your applications folder, and then put your file in, and then it'll show you the currency at the top. It always displays the currency ID in the bottom right of the screen anyway when you toggle back and forth. If you've chosen a different currency for the entry of that screen, the bottom right of the screen will show you where it says USD. It'll show you which currency you're processing in. A few things about general ledger. Do you guys use account sub-account validation? Anybody? Okay, several of you. Okay, so I just want to cover what that does and how you maintain it. The purpose of account sub-account validation is related to how do you want to choose which accounts and sub-accounts that can be used in a batch. So for instance, a lot of times on your balance sheet, you may want all your balance sheet accounts to go to your default sub-account. You don't want it to go to your P&L sub-accounts. So how do we restrict that so they can only choose those sub-accounts? So that cleans up kind of the mispostings you might encounter. So all we're saying is when we validate account sub-accounts, we're saying we're expecting to use this account and this sub-account together, and you can't use anything but those together, okay? There's a couple other things on this setup screen we want to talk about. One is the new feature where you can choose if the batch reports print. Now we can choose by module. That came out with the last release. And then the edit only in initialize mode. Do you guys know what initialize mode is? Familiar with that? So most sites have this box checked. And what that means is you will have special rights. You need special rights in order to do certain features, such as typing over your 1099 balances. So the 1099 calculated amount comes through the system, but for some reason they're wrong. If you open the vendor maintenance screen, those are all grayed out. But if you have initialize mode, you can actually make changes to those accounts. So there's certain, or those amounts, excuse me. So there's certain fields that can be changed and edited when initialize mode. Now, specifically GL, we have the ability to edit batches that come from other modules. So when you go into the journal transaction screen, when I open this screen, this drop-down is grayed out, okay? So I can't see a batch that came from payroll. I can't see a batch that comes from project. But if I'm in initialize mode, then when I open this screen, that drop-down would be available, and I could choose and look at any batch that I wanted to that comes from another module. To get to initialize mode, you go up to the blue and white peaks, and then you choose initialize mode. Now, I want to show you how account subaccount validation works. So if I don't have account subaccount validation turned on, back to my journal transaction screen, when I go to the account field, F3, I get my entire list of accounts. So I can choose any account I want. Yes? That's okay. You know, here's my opinion on questions. I'm more than willing to take things outside of my presentation, because when you do a tips and tricks, you have no idea if they're the tip or trick that you want. So, go ahead.
Can you validate project account subaccount?
No, it's only account subaccount. Yep. The question was, can you validate project account subaccount? And the answer is no, only account subaccounts. So when I F3 here, I can choose account 1030. And then in my subaccount field, I can choose anything I want here as well. So if I want to restrict the string, here's my account subaccount validation. If I turn this on, then I'm saying I want to restrict 1030 to be able to only use with subaccount 000 instead of any other subaccount. And so you can put as many subaccounts with the relationship of the account that you want. It's just that you're limited to those. So I'll go ahead and check my account subaccount validation. Go ahead.
Once you do that, though, there's no way of say like you made a mistake before maybe that was turned on.
Yep.
Once you've had that in the subaccount, there's no way of inactivating that or taking it out if you do recalculations and stuff like that for allocations, is there? Because if you do, then it takes it as an error again because it's recalculating, trying to find that subaccount.
Right. You still need, if you have anything that's expecting to post to it, if it tries, it will have a problem. Now, the thing you'll get if you turn on account subaccount is the potential for posting to the suspense account, right? So the one thing we have to be careful of is there's setup screens all throughout. They have accounts, and then the subaccount might be determined by the process as it occurs. So there could be instances where your batch won't post, or you'll get it to the suspense account because it doesn't find it as valid. But you're right, if you've had something like that. Okay, so now I'm going to check this box. Now when I go back into the journal transaction screen, I'm going to say no to save my changes. Now the whole string is what I can choose. Okay? And I only have 3 available because that's all the combinations I've created.
Excuse me.
Yep.
The account validation, you set that up by account then? Or can you do it by asset, liability?
Yeah, there's a variety of options to set those up. And I don't know if you've ever noticed, those of you guys that have them turned on, there's a generate. So I can come in here and I can literally just type every account and subaccount that goes together if I wanted to. That's kind of time consuming. Or I can go to generate combinations, and then here I can choose generate, and then I can use like templates. So I can say, well, copy everything that's in company 60 to company 70. All those combinations I want to apply to 70. Or I can come over here and say, copy whatever I have for account 1030. I want the same to apply for 2050. So it'll copy all those combinations as well. Or I can say anything that's this subaccount, copy to that subaccount. So there's a lot of choices. You can even do wildcard in here too. So I can say anything that is 1,000, so every account that starts with 1,000, I want to have the same set of combinations. Everything that starts with 2,000, or I can mask the first and the third digit, or I can do 1, question mark, 3, question mark. You get the idea. So those are faster ways to build it, because it can be kind of cumbersome to do them one by one. You could build off existing posted items, the whole subaccount table. Just play with it. The great thing is when you choose to generate it here, what it does is it goes out and finds everything that it thinks it's supposed to do. But before it saves it, you can say, no, I didn't really want that one. So I'm going to just go in and remove the lines that I don't want, then save it, and I'm good. Okay, so I'm kind of moving between PowerPoint and demo, but one of the things that, because you can have problems with postings because of the suspense account, did you guys know that the original account and subaccount that the batch was created for, you can find that? So normally, if it gets posted to the suspense account, go over here a second, they actually store the original account and subaccount in the GL trans, so you can go find it if you want to do another entry to reclass it back to the original account. So you can use a quick query, use the journal transactions quick query, and the field is called original account and original subaccount. I didn't even know that was there until about a month ago. Just stumbled across it. I've been doing this 15 years. I didn't know. We always go back to the AP DRAN, trying to find it, you know. It's been there all along. I just never knew it. Okay, let's keep moving. So initialize mode we go into through the blue and white peaks, and then we can review and edit batches from other modules. I'm hesitant to share this because with great power comes great responsibility. Is that the phrase? So if you are in initialize mode, this is a toggle button, so I turn it on and off. So once you're finished using it, I recommend turning it off. But then you can open the journal transaction screen, and I can choose batches from anywhere. So this is a PA batch. What's that? Oh, thank you. Okay, so I'm in initialize mode, and I just chose the drop down here so you can see all the batches now that are available, the modules, excuse me. So once I get into the module, I can F3 and choose the batch. Now this batch is an unposted batch. So I have free reign to change anything I want. Doesn't mean I should, but it would allow me. I could change the period of post. I could delete it. I could do whatever. So it's not a good thing. That's why you want to restrict who has rights to it. Okay? Once it's posted, you can't touch. Huh?
What would you ever go in there to do?
Yeah, once it's posted, you can't touch it, right? Sometimes there are batches that do come from other modules that for some reason or another, the subaccount's missing or invalid, and you want to change it. So you could come in here and edit that, and it would then post. Sometimes we get batches from, let's say, flexible billings. You run the process, there wasn't anything, or if something got canceled during the post process, it creates a blank batch. We don't need a blank batch. You'll get errors when you try to post it. So we would just come in here, choose the billing module, delete that batch because there's nothing in it. There wasn't supposed to be anything in it. It's a safe thing to do. Things like that. Okay. So as I mentioned earlier, you can edit your 1099 amounts in vendor maintenance if you're in initialize mode. There's other things as well, but those are usually the most common things we use. So this is a screenshot. You'll be able to tell when you're in initialize mode because fields that are normally grayed out are enabled. Other things you can do, account history. You can edit account history in initialize mode. Let's talk about subaccount validation. Do you guys use subaccount validation, or do you even know? You guys do? Okay. So there's a couple kinds of validation related to subaccount specifically. So if I have a multiple string subaccount, multiple segments, do I want to restrict my subaccount to an entire segment, or do I want them to be able to pick and choose for every segment of that subaccount? You follow? Okay. So this is important to know when you're setting up new subaccounts, because a lot of times your partners set up your subaccounts, and then something about your business changes, and you need to add a new subaccount. You have a new business unit, something like that. So it's hard to remember, where do I do that, or maybe you've never been shown because your partner did it for you. So you can go into shared information. The flexible key definition is where we set up specifically how the subaccount is supposed to look. So this subaccount string in my database happens to be 6 segments long. So there's 6 different segments. I want to validate the whole string of 6 segments. Then I check the top box where it says validate combinations. So that means when I have that box checked, then the only subaccount that can be used is what I set up in the subaccount maintenance screen. So let me go there. So if I'm under financials and I go to subaccount maintenance, and these are all in my deck. So I think it's easier to show you, but they're referenced in my deck, so you can go back and look at them. So here is where we can validate the entire string together. So when we have that combo box checked at the top, that means only things that are defined in this screen can be entered in the journal transaction screen. And sure enough, if I come here, I do still have my account sub validation turned on, so I'm going to turn that off first. The other thing when I do account sub validation, as a side note, I like to check the second box underneath, which this second box underneath, it says validate at posting. So it gives me a secondary chance for it to review that subaccount. If that box isn't checked and the combination is incorrect at the time you post it, that's when you get the suspense account. But if you have that validation checked when you post, it's going to stop you most often from posting that combination. So I'm going to uncheck these boxes so we can look how the subaccount validation works. So now I'm in journal transaction. I've unchecked that so I can choose any account I'd like. But here my subaccount is the whole string. Okay? That's because I checked that valid combo is required. But if I uncheck that box on my shared information, foundation, if I come here and I uncheck this box here, then that means any combination of those segments is allowable within the data entry screen. So if I go back to journal entry, so now I get one segment at a time. So I can pick segment by segment by segment. Now there's one other caveat that I'm going to show you, and this is where your partners maybe set it up and you don't even realize what you need to do. But we can say we want to validate each segment of the subaccount. So that means I can only choose something that's in this list. If we didn't validate the first segment, I could come in there and type anything I wanted as long as it was 2 characters long. So if we want to restrict that first segment to something that's in a possible value list, that's where we choose this last section, where we choose validate segment. So this checkbox here means you're validating each segment, and a possible value list is required. Now to set that up, you go to Foundation, and then Flexible Table Maintenance. Again, these are in my PowerPoint, so you can find them. Subaccount. And then for segment 1, that's my list of available first segments. So if you add a new business unit or something, or reporting unit, you would need to come in here, choose segment 1, add the new field that you want to include it in your subaccounts for you to even use it anywhere in the system, if you're using the validation.
Once you have the setup done for the length of each one of them, you can't change that unless you do a key change, correct?
Change the length or change?
Say like if you want to change something like the segment number 1 to 3 characters instead of 2 characters, would it not mess up your whole data if you go in and change that and then
So the question is, if you want to change the first segment from 2 to 3 characters, what's the approach? And would you mess up everything if you changed it? Probably. So the interesting thing about the segments, the subaccount in the system, and even projects and tasks, when you open a screen, you see all these dashes, but they're stored in the database. There's no dashes in them. So technically, depending on how the changes, if that still made it valid, you could use it. You wouldn't need to use a third-party product. But most often you will need to. And what a third-party product does is it goes, finds every instance of that subaccount, replaces it with the one that you want. Microsoft also has a tool where you can go and find replace as well. So it's called the Professional Services Tools Library, Pistol. Okay, so these are just slides to help you remember. Oh, and theirs is free, just as a side note. We can do correcting entries. So with SL 2011 Feature Pack 1, we got the correction button in Journal Transactions screen. So if you've created an entry and you want to correct it or reverse it, now we can go in, instead of copy, paste, and all those things we used to have to do that kind of painful, you can just hit correct or reverse and correct. So there's really 3 of them: reverse, reverse and correct, and copy. The reverse is literally, anything that was debited, it's going to be credited, vice versa. Reverse and correct. On the reverse option there, you cannot edit the reverse batch because obviously what they're trying to do is really reverse it, so they don't want you editing that. The correct batch, obviously, you could make changes, and copy is literally just a copy, okay? Any questions on that? So prior to this, we had to copy, paste into Excel, make our changes, push it back in, change the debits to credits, right? All those beautiful things. One thing on reversing entries that we've found is, specifically if you're using project, this didn't really come up before until they offered this new feature. So if you have transactions that flow over to project, if you do any kind, and let's say you're entering your labor from your third party, your payroll provider, and you're entering some kind of labor transaction into GL, and you realize that it's wrong, and you go to reverse it, with project we have to be careful. So what happens is, let's say I have a simple entry. I have 10 units for $100. It's a debit. 10 units, $100 debit, okay? And it's linked to my labor account in project. So when I post that, I'm going to update my cost in project, labor's increased. Now I find out, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. I put it to the wrong project or whatever it might be. So I go in, I remember we have this great new reverse and correct feature, right? So I go in and reverse and correct. So when I do that, I'm going to get a negative 10 units because that was my original units. I'm going to get a credit of $100. Looks great, right? Post that to project. Project interprets that it knows that the labor account is an expense account. So if you put a credit to that, it's going to flip your units. So when that posts to project, you will get a positive 10 units to project and a negative $100 to project. Now, if you guys are time and material projects, that's a big problem because you've doubled your billing in one fell swoop. And maybe tripled it if you posted another entry, right? So with project, you have to be careful to flip the sign on the units when you have a credit entry to make those positive, because it thinks I have a credit, so it's going to flip the sign on the units when it posts it to project. Okay? Questions on that?
And where do you go into projects to do that?
You have to do it through another entry. You do it before you release the batch. So,
How do you do that? Because right now we got sequence scripts that we do. Because at month end, I have to do a lot of labor and material.
right.
Move hours from one month to the other month because the system doesn't.
Well, you just have to make sure if you're putting credits in, you don't put negative units. That's the bottom line. So however you need to do that from your journal entry. If you've made the entry with a negative, then you're going to have a problem. So just fixing how you create your journal entry in If you've created an extra entry that's wrong, then you've got the recommendation would to do another entry to flip what it did. So understanding the rules of how it's going to post it.
But to my understanding, whatever comes over from GL over the project,
Yeah.
no matter if it's negative or positive, it
No.
automatically comes in the project as a positive.
No, that's not true. If it's a credit, it flips the units. If it's a debit, the units maintain the same.
So it goes in, yeah.
No, if you put in a positive 10 units and a credit, you will get a negative 10 units in project. It's going to flip the sign whatever you do with the credit. Am I making sense? Okay. So,
This is only not when you're doing a regular journal entry you're crediting on your own. This is only when you do the
well, it could be. If they're doing it by hand that way, the same problem. But you're right. It's been manifested because of this reversing feature, because the reverse literally reverses everything that's in the batch, whether it's the unit, the sign on the unit, and the credit. So it's been brought to light through this, but you could be doing a journal entry and have the same problem if you made a negative units for your credit entry. So it will always flip the sign of the credit, the line that has the credit. That's the easiest way to describe it. Okay, moving on, because we may not have that many project people.
So I missed how you got to the box that showed how you reversed and correct.
Oh,
If I just make a journal entry, post it as incorrect,
yeah.
how do I get to that box?
That box is right here. Do you see that?
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
So once it's posted, if it's not been posted, that box, that's disabled. So it's enabled, and it's only on GL entries. You can't go into a payroll batch or something like that.
Have to be in initialize mode?
That I don't know for sure. I don't think so. You just regular. Yep. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Let's see. Other thing, if you are using project, this is a side note, but you could require employee ID and units if you're entering something in a place other than projects. So if you're entering a journal entry AP document, if you're linking it to projects and you need that labor to have the employee ID and units, you can force that through this setup in the chart of accounts. Extended budgeting. I don't plan to spend a whole lot of time on this, but we have the ability to create what's called extended budgets. And does anybody know anything about this or use it? One person. Okay. It's more than I thought. Okay. So normally this is general ledger budgets. So normally when we see budgets, you pretty much put them in budget maintenance in general ledger. The account, the sub-account, and then you have 10 fields, or 12 buckets, one for each period, right? You have the choice when you use that budget maintenance to either evenly distribute the number you put in, or you type in every unit separately, right, or every amount for each month. We do have what's called extended budgeting, where we can take information that's already in the system and use that to help us budget for next year. So we can take last year's actual budgets and then use those breakdown of the monthly postings to prorate our next year's budget according to actuals from last year. Or you can take last year's budget ledger and you can mark that up like 3%, and across the board those numbers will change. So there's some choices on what you can do to help you with this extended budgeting. I think it does, yes. I don't think there's a separate key for that. What I failed to do is I meant to layer these on top, so I apologize. There was supposed to be animation. But if you look at the second, this one here, the budget distribution, the middle screenshot, if you can see on the left-hand side, it says actual budget, even, last 12. Do you see those words? Okay. So if you have like a business where you have seasonal stuff and there's fluctuation and you want to budget the seasonally as opposed to a straight or even. So you could set up some kind of like the last 12 or set up some other kind of ratio, and it would take that and split it, your budget number for the year over that relationship rather than evenly. So it's something to think about if you have complicated budgets. So. As we go along, we're going to talk about a few quick queries. Specifically, this one is for batches. I like this because to look at batches through reports, you have to go, if it's an AP batch, you go to AP and look at that batch report. If it's an AR batch, you go to AR and look at that batch report. So where can we find all our batches, regardless of where it's created, with all the information I need? So there's the batch query. And you can see the status of those batches, so H means hold, so this is kind of a reference. C means completed, P means posted, U unposted, V void, D and deleted. Side note, completed means there's no GL impact, so if you see a batch that has a completed status, that means it doesn't create a journal entry. Example, payroll time entry batch. It just is a batch to create time cards, but it doesn't actually go to general ledger. That's a completed batch. The released field in that query is 1 means it's yes, it's been released, and 0 means no, it has not. The other one that's nice is the journal transactions. Again, this could be an alternative to your detailed GL report in columnar format, so you can export it, pivot table, whatever you want to do with it, right? The nice thing also about that is it includes your projects and tasks. So sometimes I just want to find what's all the revenue posted to a specific project in GL. Okay, the detailed GL report out of the box does not include the project ID, but it's stored on every record that comes to and from project, so you can find the project and task it was posted to. Yeah. You might have to add the column. I can't remember if it's included. Yeah, I can't remember if it's in there or not.
I just added this recently to a friend of mine. They use SL, and I had to add the project ID to the GL, but I didn't know about it being included.
Correct. And the problem with the detailed GL report, the reason it's primarily, I believe, it's not there, it's a real estate issue, right? Where do you put it? You got to take something else out to put it in. Correct, right. So you either you sacrifice one thing for the other. So here we get the best of both worlds. Unbilled AR, you can see for an entire project since the beginning of time what's been posted in unbilled AR, so you could get your unbilled AR balance by project. Unbilled revenue, same thing, okay? Lots of nice applications for that. I do know the period to post is not in the, why they didn't, I don't understand that. So any of these queries you open up, the period to post I don't believe is by default one of the columns. You have to add it. So if you're looking for it, it's there. Okay, side note. AP. Any other questions on GL before we move on? I get chatty. Okay. AP setup. Just little side notes, things you may or may not know. But first of all, If you're interested in 1099, how to make updates and things like that, Paige and I have a presentation right after this one. We're going to talk about 1099s. We can control the transaction description for both AP and AR. In both setup screens, there's a drop-down where you can choose if you wanted to include the customer ID or name or combinations thereof, or just a user enter field. So if you're not happy with your transaction descriptions, you might want to play with that. Separate check. I don't know how many people use separate check. Okay, so basically what that means is every AP voucher you enter, when you print checks, you get a separate check for each one. So that's a wonderful feature. If you have a debit adjustment, though, you can encounter a little bit of a problem because it can't print a negative check. So that will cause your batch to suspend. So if you do have a debit adjustment you need to link with a voucher, you'll need to uncheck that separate check before you select them so that you can combine them onto the same document, especially like for a zero check or something like that. The Documents tab. I'm surprised how many customers don't know about the Documents tab, but maybe you do. I just want to include it. So here we can see all the activity for this vendor. Yeah, I'm an AP. All this for this vendor. And I don't think the grid to Excel works very well in here. I'm not sure. Does it? It works great?
I don't think it works very well.
Right. I don't think so either. So that's the only kind of drawback. You're going to say something? The grid to Excel. Yeah. But if you need that, just go to a quick query instead. You know, if you need it in Excel, just go to the AP Documents quick query and run it for that vendor. Same thing, right? But this is a way you can visually see all the documents that were created, their balance, those kind of things.
Why don't it offer the check number?
What's that?
Why doesn't it offer the check number? Like when you pay a voucher, even if you don't
Yep. You're right. It doesn't. I don't know why. Go ahead.
Because it's not a one-to-one, so a lot of times we run into issues with that because if the voucher's paid, if you pay a partial, you get a voucher for $200 and you're willing to pay $100, but you still got $100 that you're, that's questionable. I mean, I have clients that pay partials.
Right.
And there's only one field. I mean, it would be.
They'd have to do it similar to what they do AR, which I'll show next. But the one place I believe you could get that, if you use Business Portal, there's Business Portal queries, and one of those actually has where you can reference the adjusted document and the adjusting document. So I think you could get it from there if you needed to, but or it could be made into a quick query with a SQL statement. But you're right, it does not include it. You can get to the documents maintenance screen through that document button on the bottom left. Just a note on QuickSend, we can have multiple PO addresses and multiple email defaults as well. Let's see, vendors and customers and projects can have doc share. So if you want to, you can create a SharePoint site for every vendor or every customer or every project if you'd like by clicking one button, the top right-hand corner. If you click that button and you have it configured, it would create a document or SharePoint site in the matter of seconds for that vendor. And then you could have purchase orders pushed to that document site. If you choose to do it by project, all the project invoices would be dumped in electronic form to that document site. So, so let's talk a little bit about document maintenance. I think it's probably an underutilized screen in some instances. I'm trying to select this voucher in a check batch, and there's nothing I do that'll let me select this voucher in a check batch. Why is that happening? Okay. Well, there's a couple reasons. One is the document no longer has a balance. It's already been paid. Okay? The other primary one has already been selected in another payment selection batch. And it doesn't want you to pay it twice. Imagine that. We actually stop you from paying it twice. How do you know which one it is? Well, the document you're having problems with, go to document maintenance, pull that document up. It's going to tell you. Because the box in the middle, first of all, if the document balance on the far right says 0, you're done. That's why you can't select it. Okay? So first thing you can do is check to see if you have a document balance. Okay, I'm good there. I have a document balance. The other piece is it's selected in another batch. So that checkbox in the middle of the screen where it says selected, if that box is checked, that's why you're not able to select it in your payment batch, because it thinks it's in another batch. So then you start looking, what other batches do I have out there? Payment batch, check batches, was it selected? Has it been printed and not kept? Then you start looking that direction. Okay? But this takes all the guesswork out of it.
Could also be on hold.
It could be on hold. Very good. And we actually see that in here as well. So there's a status of, where's that at? Oh, at the top. It says status active. And you can have it as a hold, which is a great point. If you don't want this paid, you can change the document to hold. And you go to payment selection. This will not be included. Okay? Vendor class. This is pretty standard, but one of the things you can do with vendor classes is set up defaults. So when you create a new vendor, if you want the AP account to be unique for a certain vendor class or a sub-account or any of these items you see in this list, if you choose a specific vendor class on that vendor, new vendor, the defaults for that new vendor will come from here rather than the AP setup. If the vendor's already been saved and you go change the vendor class, it's not going to replace what's on the vendor. This is on a new vendor being created is when this would happen. Voucher and adjustment, just want to kind of give a plug for multi-company here that you could, if you wanted to, enter a voucher and then expense that voucher to more than one company. So if in this instance, I would get a debit to company 60, the first line, and I don't even know the amount because I didn't do a very good screenshot, but then the second line would debit company 70 to that expense account. But the entire payable would go to company 60. So I'd have the payable all in 60, and then when this is released, I'd get a due to, due from. So the payable is all in company 60. May not be something you use, but I want you to know that it's available. You can override the AP account in this screen as well. That tab, if you go to the override tab, you could edit your AP account if desired. Almost every screen has the ability now to attach both notes and documents. So if you need to attach documents, you can. Do you guys know where to set that up? It's in shared information. You can set it up for all screens by typing the word default in that setup screen. If you want to know about that, come see me. I didn't put a screenshot in, but. Or you can limit it to certain screens by going into the document attachment setup screen, and you can say only one attachment allowed in vendor maintenance and AP voucher, whatever it might be. Pay when paid. We can do pay when paid. That would be another possible reason you cannot select your voucher for payment if you do payment selection. If you've created a voucher and you've put the terms pay when paid on it, and it's linked to an invoice that has not been paid yet, then that won't be visible, or it won't select it for payment in payment selection. There are some things you can change in there. I can't remember if that's one of them. If you go in Initialize mode in document maintenance, you can change the date. Some things like that. I think the terms might be one you can change, but I don't recall for sure. Okay, so pay when paid. We're not going to spend much time on that. Quick queries that you might like or haven't used before. AP documents. So for the check register, that you could use this to find your check register. You can find links to PO in here. So if you've linked your vouchers to purchase orders, that's in the quick query, so you can find which ones have been linked together. One thing when you're looking at transactions in a quick query, other than general ledger, so if you look at AP Tran, AR Tran, they store the debits and the credits. The line indicates it's of a debit or a credit. So you see the debit credit column. The first line is a debit, the second one's a credit. So if you're doing queries out of there and you want to see all the credits, you just need to make sure you're selecting where the DRC, the debit credit equals C. It's just something to keep in mind. Okay, void checks. We get a lot of these the first of the year. So when you guys void your checks, yes, Becky?
Is the vendor's name one of the fields you
I
add?
think it's in there. I don't. I think it's right beside. I think it's right beside the ID right there, right? Okay. Just a side note, I had so many calls this year on this, so I just want to kind of bring awareness to it. And it's just in January, but I've had a lot of people have a check that they void in January because that's when we're clearing out our outstanding checks a lot, right, at the end of the year. When you void them, make sure you change that date to be last year, especially if you're using Cash Manager, because if you void it with a January date and it was a December check or even earlier, it's going to still show on your December bank rec screen because it doesn't think it was voided till January. So it's just annoying. And then so it doesn't adjust your cash balance till January as well. So just be very careful about that. You can fix it a couple ways. You can do some journal entries. There's an O-type entry where I don't know. Anyway, I just want to say hello. Be careful. AR. Just a side note on posting options. You can post in summary or in detail, and that's in all the setup screens. So if I want to post all my AR batches in summary, meaning I get one line per account, sub-account, then instead of 15 lines for every posting of that account, sub-account. So there's GL posting options in every setup screen. There's retention periods in every setup screen. So if you are, most people I don't think delete detail a whole lot anymore because of cheapness of storage. But if you do delete detail, or if you're afraid somebody's going to accidentally choose delete detail, you can make those retention periods pretty high. So even if they accidentally do it, they're not going to, you probably don't have 99 years of stuff. So those are just some safeguards you can do. So this is saying if years to retain history, so if you would happen to delete history, it would only delete stuff from 99 years ago. Everything since then it would keep. Customer maintenance. So this current balance and this future balance is relative to the current AR period. So if I'm in period 3 and I have a invoice from period 2, that would be a current, or that would show in the current bucket. If I had an invoice from period 4, that would show in the future period bucket. So it's relative to this current period, the period that you're in. Just like in AP, we have the document tab. In AR, we have the activity button. This does what you want it to do in AP, but it does it only for AR. We can include applications in here. So if you have an invoice that was paid by 2 or 3 other payments, if you choose include applications, you can see all the checks that were applied to that document in here. These fields up here, these are not based on the current AR setup screen. Those you have to run a process for these to update. So a lot of times people see this and they go, that doesn't look right. you got to run the AR aging process for these to be updated. Okay? So you can go to age customer detail, and then based on the date that you run it for, that's when all these aging buckets at the top are updated. Okay? These down here. Okay?
Side note, in BP, some of the reports that are out there, and I don't know if it's the way we were customized or not, some of the reports, if you don't run this, then they're getting the wrong information at the end on.
Yeah, if you're running any report that runs off of these customer balances table, they'll be incorrect because it's reading from a specific table. When you run like the aged AR report or the period sensitive aged AR report, that report has logic in it, so it's really looking at the document date versus the report date and deciding how old it is. But if you're looking at certain reports that read from the tables rather than sensitive to a current date, you'll have to run this process to make it current. Payment application. So I get a lot of calls about, I entered my payment, I applied it to the wrong invoice, right? Hate when it happens. So what do you do about it? You can void the payment. So these three options in the payment application inquiry reversal screen allow you to do three different things with a payment. First one is reverse it. So that just means I entered this document and I applied it to invoice number 1234. But I should have applied it to 5678. So now this payment and this invoice are linked together, and I didn't want that. So if I reverse the selected application, it unlinks them. So now the invoice balance is restored to the full amount, the payment balance is restored. Now these two documents are no longer connected, and now I can go in and I can apply this payment to 5678 so that I can link those two documents. If I entered it to the wrong customer, I can reclassify that payment to a different customer. This happens if you're using multiple customers a lot and you have certain invoices to certain customers and you meant to put it to a different customer. You can make that payment automatically be on that customer rather than the one you entered it for. The last one is you can void it. So the last one is the only one that creates a journal entry because the other two are just reclassifying what the document is, but I have no accounting related to it. But the last one is just saying that payment should not have been entered. And when the payment was entered, it debited cash, right, and credited AR. I didn't want that to happen. So now I want to reverse that GL posting. So you can void the payment. It reopens the document it's linked to, and it creates a debit to cash and a credit to AR. Did I say that right? No, backwards. Debit to AR, credit to cash. Okay? Okay.
And we did that for several weeks.
Okay.
And those batches were posted, and we needed to reverse them and put them in. We had to go through each individual transaction and use that void selected application because we didn't know a way to reverse the entire batch.
Right.
Is there a way to do that?
Nope. Once the batch is processed, it then becomes individual documents. So if something was wrong with that batch, it doesn't matter. You have to fix the documents themselves, which is what you were doing. Yep. Okay. Document maintenance in here, we can actually see payments as well, prepayments, all those things. Any document, it's an AR document, you can see in here. Now on AP side, we go to document maintenance. We don't see checks in there. But you can go to manual check entry screen and see every check you've ever printed and what documents were linked to them. That's the place you can see your check and see what documents were associated with them. Yeah, I went fast. So every check that's printed in the system, whether it's a system check or a manual check, if you go into the manual check entry screen, every check batch that's ever been created in the system is stored in there. So you just F3, choose the batch, and you can see the document and the documents it was linked to. Okay. I'm just going to skip this. Just a 2-second thing on this. You can link invoices or payments. You can have payments update project if you want to. So I don't know if anybody needs that. If you do, come see me afterward. But basically, if you enter a payment, it can show up as a payment on the project if you desire. And those are the steps. One of the things I get asked about is I need a deposit slip, or I need something that resembles a deposit slip, or at least a list of what's in my deposits, and I can't find anything that has that. So a lot of times I'll say, go to the quick query by the batch. You can get all the documents in that batch and dump it to Excel or whatever you need to do with it, so you can get a list of all those payments in that batch that you took to the bank. If you want to see kind of a rudimentary way to find out what customers have the most sales and how much sales did they have last year, we store all that by year, by customer. So this customer history quick query, you can see what your sales, your payments, your credit memos, all those things are available in that customer history quick query. We can now delete suspended batches in Initialize mode in a few screens. So if you go into Initialize mode, remember the blue and white peaks? The batches suspended, vouchers, and invoices, I think, are the two that we can now delete if we need to. Okay, let's see what we got here. Oh, hey, 3 minutes left. Who'd have thunk it? Do you guys have anything I didn't cover that you would like to know?
Payment for project, how does that work? Do you put a category to it?
Yeah, let me go back to it. I thought I was out of time, so I just kind of went quickly. Yeah, so there's really multiple steps. First, we have to check the box that we want to transfer payments to project. That's in Project Controller Setup. The second thing is we need to link an account category to our AR account in the chart of accounts. So the AR trade account category, whatever you want it called. Then the last thing is when you enter an invoice, whether, like if you're in AR, you link that. Because now you have that AR trade account with an account category, then the project becomes a required field in the invoice and memo screen. Well, this is the invoice side.
Not all invoices. We have invoices that sometimes hit multiple projects. So how would we do that?
Right. Well, you would have to probably put a separate one in. Huh? Yeah. I mean, you can distribute them to the projects below, but that's not going to link that payment then to them. So you'd have to do a separate invoice for those. Okay.
I was wondering why we didn't do it. Now I know why.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. All right. Thank you guys for coming.